nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hello, thanks for joining us for our Week in Review. Alberta will establish an office to combat human trafficking, one of multiple recommendations from a task force that the United Conservative government is moving ahead with. Justice Minister Tyler Shandro told a news conference on last Sunday that the office will provide support and access to services for victims and survivors, and that it will need to form a strong partnership with the Indigenous community.
Because Indigenous women, sadly, are a primary target of human traffickers and are grossly overrepresented among its victims, this office would need to form a strong partnership with the Indigenous community. An Indigenous-specific response would need to be incorporated in every aspect of the office's operations: support, training, education, as well as outreach.
The task force was appointed in May 2020 and was chaired by country music star Paul Brandt. Brandt, in a statement, says human trafficking is one of the fastest growing crimes in Canada. All Alberta home care and hospices could soon be licensed and regulated. Alberta's Health Minister Jason Copping introduced the bill, which aims to bring together 6 related pieces of legislation and 3 standards of care, some going back more than 30 years. All care facilities, including home care, designated supporting living facilities, and hospices would be licensed and regulated, and there would be more authority for the minister to monitor and enforce standards.
This new legislation will help transform the continuing care system to reflect the importance of residents and client quality of life and a person-centered approach to care and services. It will enable shifts to expand home and community care, improve care within continuing care homes and in other settings as well. And it will also allow us to start implementing recommended actions identified in our review of continuing care homes and palliative and end-of-life care.
Penalties under the bill would increase to $100,000 a day from the current maximum of $1,000. Lethbridge MP Rachel Thomas is speaking out following the federal government's new carbon emission reduction plan that was released earlier this week. Thomas says the Trudeau Liberal government has missed every target they've set when it comes to environmental policies, adding that this new plan is just going to make life more expensive for Canadians.
Quite frankly, I don't think the government cares. I think they're more concerned about expanding their ideological agenda and pushing it upon Canadians than they are about actually caring for the citizens of this country. And so we can expect job loss. We can expect the cost of living to go up. We've already seen this. Tomorrow, April 1st, we're going to see yet another increase in the carbon tax. We're going to see the fuel at the pumps go up. We're going to see the cost of home heating go up. Everything in life becomes more expensive when this government touches environmental policy.
Thomas believes the plan will do little in terms of helping the planet and will increase cost of living for Canadians. Calgary Street Pastor Arthur Paulowski has been released from prison, and his attorney, Sarah Miller, says she and her client will be fighting the recent charges that were laid following the incident that took place near the Coutts border. Paulowski's next court appearance was on Friday, April 1st, and Miller explained that some of the challenges he's facing and doesn't believe that new charges are typical procedure.
I would say that he's facing ordinary challenges that most people would face after 45 days of incarceration. The Calgary Remand Centre and now the Edmonton Remand Centre, they have had him in certain units that either there are certain restrictions in place so that he can't socialize or be out of his cell as often as some other units. I think probably it's fair to say that a lot of isolation, a lot of challenges that come with being incarcerated and in a cell for up to 23 hours a day. There's many people who participated in the Coutts protest who had their vehicles down there for days on end before and after Mr. Paulowski went down there. He went down there to express his support, and he's been incarcerated for over 45 days. He's been charged criminally. The Crown has decided to proceed by indictment. He's got no criminal record. If the difference between the people who participated in these activities and were there is any indication, I think he is being made an example of.
Miller says Paulowski's new charges are a breach of probation, as it's alleged he did not complete community service hours and failed to report to his probation officer. Thanks for joining us today. If you're watching us on YouTube right now, please give us a like and subscribe. We will be right back. Keep it right here. Welcome back. The province is calling on Canada to end the carbon tax increase scheduled for April 1st. Finance Minister Travis Toews says now's not the time to increase tax burdens on Albertans.
The carbon tax hits Albertans in so many ways, directly and indirectly. We will continue to call on the federal government to listen to Canadians' concerns and not increase the tax burden at this difficult time. I firmly believe the best thing governments can do during times of inflation is spend less, borrow less, and tax less. And that's exactly what Alberta's government is doing. It's why on April 1st, we will no longer collect the provincial fuel tax. We will be suspending it, saving Alberta drivers 13 cents a litre while oil prices are high.
Well, Friday was April Fool's Day, and the price at the pump was not a prank. The federal government once again raised the carbon tax. However, in response to the carbon tax increase, Alberta Premier Jason Kenney has removed the provincial fuel tax for the time being. Nathan Ryder has more on how consumers may not see these savings.
With the calendar switching to April, the federal government will be increasing the carbon tax. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney announced he would be removing 13 cents per litre in provincial fuel taxes. But according to Dan McTagg, the president of Canadians for Affordable Energy, gas prices may not drop that amount.
The market and, of course, the carbon tax will take away about 5 cents of that. So best case scenario, you see prices drop to $1, maybe $1.61 a litre of gasoline.
Some motorists were filling up this afternoon at this Northside Gas King location. Many are not thrilled about the federal government's carbon tax increase.
This is as ridiculous as the carbon tax itself, in my opinion. Canada is carbon neutral, so it's just a money grab, in my opinion.
I'm really disappointed. I thought they would hold back till the economy settles down and inflation settles down. But they're going to go ahead with it one way or the other.
It's BS. I think it's not needed. I think he's just trying to milk us dry.
Even those on the same side of the political aisle as Trudeau are criticizing the Prime Minister. McTagg served for 18 years as a member of Parliament in the Liberal Party. He says the government should see the need for energy in today's world.
This is completely unorthodox for that party to continue down that road of being so naive and frankly, not reading the room, not much less the economic tea leaves that are in front of them. Every part of the world is now concerned about energy crisis, and doing their best to get energy supplies to their jurisdictions in light of what's happened in Russia.
For Bridge City News, I'm Nathan Ryder.
The federal government hopes to cut greenhouse gas emissions by more than half in the next 8 years, with a target of reaching net zero emissions by 2050. BCN's Angela Stewart hears from an author who says everyone has to be on board for the plan to be successful in the end.
This is an important moment as people come together to drive our next steps on climate action.
Create jobs and keep the air clean. These are just some of the key points out of the federal government's new emissions reduction plan.
So we put down a clear track for where the sector needs to go. Emission cuts of a little over 30% compared to 2005, with a little over 40% emission cuts compared to where we are today.
Trudeau believes this new plan will help guide us in the right direction to be able to cut emissions from the oil and gas sector. Author of Carbon Capital and the Cloud, Jeffrey Can, says with the new plan, the government is also being faced with other challenges.
Energy security, the economic recoveries coming out of the pandemic and related issues, and of course, managing to a cleaner future climate environment.
Another aspect of the Fed's plan is to bring in mandatory ZEV sales targets by 20% by 2026.
And 60% of all new personal vehicles sold in Canada will be zero emission by 2030.
to be able to get an economic electric charge point local to where you are is going to be a very heavy lift.
Ken says for us to reach the goal of cutting emissions by 2030, everybody has to be in the same playing field.
It takes time, and we're going to have to make some hard choices. And to date, our choices that we've taken as a society, as a country, are to continue on with the status quo.
For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
Meanwhile, government reaction in Alberta has been not so favorable toward the Liberals' new climate plan. After the break, you'll see my interview from earlier this week with Tyler Dawson. Tyler pointed out that there was a rare show of bipartisan support as both Rachel Notley and the UCP condemned the federal government's emissions plan. Keep it right here. We will be right back.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is probably not going to back down because the Alberta government is upset about the carbon tax hike, as it has been since it was elected.
Welcome back. Many of our viewers are talking about the future leadership of the UCP, who really is the face and the base of the party. This past week, it's reported that during the Christmas break, Jason Kenney has thought about stepping down as leader. So far, Premier Kenney remains in his position, but that could all change April 9th. Earlier this week, our legislative reporter Tyler Dawson and I met virtually to discuss Alberta politics and the latest developments about Jason Kenney's future, tax cuts, and the April 1st carbon tax. Have a look. As we all know by now, there have been changes made to the way the United Conservatives are holding Jason Kenney's leadership review with the switch to mail-in ballot instead of in-person voting in Red Deer, where some 15,000 people were already registered?
That's right. Yeah, they'd expected considerably fewer than that. And sort of by the cutoff date of March 19th to buy party memberships, they had about 15,000 people register and had expected, another 5,000 or 10,000 more to register to come down to Red Deer. So basically, the party's line is that it was, unwieldy to be able to hold an in-person voting day in Red Deer in the facility they had rented, because of course it all would have been done with paper and pencil, and people would have had to count out the ballots at the end of the day. So they basically said, look, this is just not doable, and so they've moved to mail-in ballots, which will go to every member of the United Conservatives, not just those who registered for the leadership review. So it's about 55,000 is what I've heard. And then there'll be ID requirements and a return mailing envelope and all these things to get the votes back into an auditing firm, which is going to handle all that. So the big thing that's happening here is that no longer will we know the results on April 9th as we would have if it had been done in person. So it'll now be like May 18th, I think, when we finally find out whether or not Jason Kenney is going to stick around as the leader of the party. And this change, of course, has been hugely controversial, with Kenney critics saying that this is, moving the goalposts, changing the game to benefit Jason Kenney. Kenney's people saying that, no, this is a logistical matter. So, even if the news was announced a week or so ago, it is certainly going to be a topic of conversation among partisan conservatives in this province for a few more weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Way to stretch it out, too. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Now, Tyler, there have been some reports that Kenney has privately alluded to the fact that he could just give up his spot as premier and retire to a private life. Do you think that this is really something he would do?
No, I don't really think so. There was some chatter that he'd had some of these conversations around Christmas time, sort of hashing out what might happen, if he decided to step back from being premier and step back from politics. But, he has said that, look, I could quit politics tomorrow and, I'd have my evenings back, I'd have my weekends back and all this stuff. But in this recording that was leaked to media, CBC broke the story. He basically said that the attempt to oust him as leader was sort of from these fringe lunatics, and that the UCP is a mainstream conservative party.
Now, Tyler, the carbon tax is set to go up by 3 cents on April 1st, but Jason Kenney introduced a motion in the legislature this week condemning the hike.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say I think it's going to do anything. The Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is probably not going to back down because the Alberta government is upset about the carbon tax hike, as it has been since it was elected. But it's a notable thing because in the context of everything going on with Kenny's leadership, in the context with his sort of relatively low approval numbers, both within the party and outside the party, he does need to sort of have a few sort of red meat policies for his base or gestures for the party base to remind them that he is still a conservative and is still on their side. So I think you can look at this as part of that. And the other part of it is, of course, that Jason Kenney is philosophically opposed to carbon taxes, and so is his government. So that is happening. And then the other thing that is sort of happening in context here is that April 1st, when the carbon tax increase comes into play, bringing it up to, I think, 12 cents a litre, that's the same day that the Alberta government will be dropping the fuel tax for diesel and gasoline. So that should bring a little bit of relief at the pumps. They announced that maybe 3 weeks ago now. So essentially, the way the government is framing this is, we campaigned on canceling the carbon tax, and by eliminating the fuel tax, we're, sort of balancing out the carbon tax in that way. Yeah. So,
it's like just
it'll certainly,
kidding.
yeah, exactly. So it'll take that out of it. Whereas we'll have to see what happens with prices that are, totally outside of the government's control.
Well, Thursday I sat down with Mayor Blair Painter from the Crowsnest Pass region in Alberta, and we talked about the changes in both coal mine development and operation over the past 20 years. We also discussed that there's an idea being floated where a new coal mine could be used to clean up an old environmental mess at an abandoned mine site in the area. Keep it right here. Welcome back. Yesterday, we showed you part 1 of our interview with Crowsnest Mayor Blair Painter. Today, we bring you part 2, where we focus on their local ski hill and revitalization of their community. Take a look. Do you think that there could be new technologies being developed that could make coal mining safer for the environment?
Well, absolutely. Why not, right? We see Teck Resources on the BC side that have inherited a water problem, and right now Teck is global leaders in the clean water industry. They've spent billions of dollars to develop a clean water strategy and to be able to put contaminated water, clean it, and put it back into the river. So yeah, there's definitely going to be things that pop up from time to time, and why wouldn't there be an opportunity to grow that?
No, that's awesome. Now, the natural areas for skiing and fishing, of course, are so important to the citizens of your area. Can you maybe talk about the people's connection to the land?
Well, those that are fortunate enough to live in our community can appreciate that. Within a 5-10 minute walk, they're into the wilderness. And that's really important for the people who live here. And that's why they choose to live here. We have an abundance of natural recreation that we can visit on a daily basis, whether it's hiking or fishing, or, we have great cross-country skiing. We have a downhill ski hill right in town. We have a swimming pool, we have an amazing golf course, like it could go on and on and on. And that's all within a 5-10 minute drive, or, literally wherever you live in our community, a 10-minute walk and you're into the wilderness. So that's part of it.
Now, you mentioned the ski hill. So of course, that's a huge attraction that's been operating for almost 100 years in the past. So we're talking the Powder Keg ski area. Some of us, we sometimes tend to forget about it, but it's right there. So what can you tell us about how this ski hill has been developed in the last several years?
Well, the Past Powder Keg Ski Hill, or PPK as we like to call it, is definitely a great asset to our community. And we are seeing growing numbers of people from all around Southern Alberta coming to our ski hill. And every year it grows and grows and grows. So, this ski hill is, I'm not going to date myself, but apparently in earlier years, there was even rope tows on this ski hill. And then it progressed to T-bar. And although we'd like to say, hey, let's put a chairlift in there, we just don't have the volumes of people so far to be able to make that work.
Okay, so jumping from nature and skiing, let's talk about something else here. So the town of Coleman had an initiative to become a regional arts hub. So what changes have you seen over the last few years with that?
You know, we did a revitalization program a couple or 3 years ago, I think it is now, in that area. And, you know, that was spurred by infrastructure concerns and a will of our council and those that frequent the downtown Coleman to do this revitalization project there. And what we've been able to do is to promote the arts in our community and also our history of the area. So not only do we have different artist studios down there, we also have restaurants that cater to everybody. And we have the Alberta Police Barracks facility, which is right beside our museum. When was it? I think it was 2 years ago, we also installed EV charging station in that area to accommodate electric vehicles that are touring through our community. So it's a nice place to stop, charge your car, check out the museum, APB building, have some lunch, whatever, and then move on. So yeah, we're excited about that, and I think it's the people that frequent that area are really pleased with what we've done as well. We also have a Roxy Theater there, an old theater that has just recently been designated as a historic site.
What a great part of our province. I know many are looking forward to a camping trip or two this summer to the Pass area. If you missed part one of our interview with Mayor Painter, head over to YouTube and check it out. Coming up next, we take a look at the stories that made the headlines here in Southern Alberta this week. Welcome back. Well, here in Lethbridge, it was an emotional start to the week for what was supposed to be a 5-day trial in the case of Neil Martin Scout, the man accused in a careless driving accident in 2020 when a 10-year-old boy was struck by a large SUV and later died. BCN's Angela Stewart was in the courtroom that day and filed this report.
That's right, Jeanette. The trial will likely be pushed back because Scout's defense lawyer, Greg White, was absent today due to a personal matter. The courtroom was told the defense was not in a position to complete trial today. Justin Dean, who spoke on behalf of Scout's defense lawyer, was able to connect with White on how to proceed following a brief adjournment. A letter from White was given to Dean on the specifics about why he wasn't able to participate in trial this week, but those details were not shared. Many family members of the victim were in attendance this morning, including the victim's mother, who could be seen crying. Now, Scout has been charged with 1 count of careless driving causing death after 10-year-old Charles McIntyre was struck in a crosswalk near Aquitania Boulevard in April of 2020. McIntyre later died of his injuries in hospital. Scout, who is a medical doctor, has pleaded not guilty. Now, court will be back tomorrow morning when trial dates will be set, and prosecution has stated December is likely when new dates will be available. Jeanette?
Thanks, Angela. And since Angela's report, the parties have agreed that the trial for Mr. Scout will be held from August 29th till September 2nd. This past Monday marked a very rare day of action on some Alberta post-secondary campuses. Students voted for a strike to protest to what some are calling an extreme increase in tuition. The province has a cap of 7% on tuition increases. However, both the University of Alberta and the University of Calgary applied for the exceptional increases, which were at first rejected by the Alberta Minister of Education. As with inflation, tuition has been increasing year over year in the past few years. However, in this case, it was the size of these extreme increases which alarmed the students. The province gave the green light to increase tuition by 100% in some programs. The main player in Alberta's air ambulance space is STARS Air Ambulance, and they have recently started connecting with Albertans through their new podcast. The podcast seeks to highlight the harrowing experiences of workers that have undertaken over 45,000 missions across Western Canada since 1985. The announcement of the podcast coincides with funding from the Alberta government for STARS as well. As BCN's Micah Quinn explains, the organization also makes emergency trips to the city of Lethbridge.
STARS Air Ambulance opened its first base in Calgary in 1985.
We have bases in Manitoba and Saskatchewan as well. And in Alberta last year, we did 2,994 missions in Alberta from our 3 bases. And to Lethbridge last year, we flew 78 missions. Lethbridge is one of the places that we go to most often, actually, across Western Canada.
Staff from STARS say the reason the podcast was started was to flesh out the stories of doctors, nurses, and paramedics who have been there on the front lines during these high-risk emergency situations.
Breaking down one STARS mission over 6 parts. And that gives us an opportunity to explore the aviation side, the medical side, what goes on in the background, the STARS Emergency Link Center, where the calls come in and are organized and are dispatched, and all the various elements. And then afterward, what about at the hospital, where we transfer care, but sometimes our people are still involved in certain ways. And, the mental health of our people afterward when they go through these really difficult missions. They are humans after all.
The Alberta government announced on Friday that STARS funding from the province will increase from $7 million to more than $15 million. The province will now fund close to 50% of the operating costs for the organization.
This significant increase in funding will allow STARS highly specialized critical care air medical crews to continue serving Albertans, especially those in rural and remote communities, by doing what they do best, saving lives when time matters most.
STARS covers 90% of Alberta's rural and remote population.
We often say the red helicopter is the most visible aspect of the care we provide, but the real magic is what happens inside.
In 1985, the very first STARS mission was for a premature baby born in Lethbridge. There will be a bonus episode of the STARS Mission Ready podcast that will explore how the nonprofit was founded, and that very same patient from Lethbridge will share her story. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Thanks so much, Micah. Well, Halo and Hero Air Ambulances are 2 smaller services providing emergency air services to Alberta as well. Earlier this week, announcements were made where Halo would be given $1 million and a guaranteed contract with Alberta Health Services, and Hero will receive $2 million with a contract for 5 years. Right after this short break, we hear from the independent MLA for Cypress Medicine Hat, Drew Barnes, about Alberta's budget. Stay with us.